It's time for all of those fun end of the year videos. Last week, probably, or just last video, hard to keep up with this stuff. I talked about some of my least favorite books. Now let's go positive. What are some books I enjoyed? So this video is all about some of my favorite books so far this year. First I have The Nightingale. So one of my goals this year was to read more of genres that I don't read enough. Historical fiction. What is that? Historical fiction? I almost said historical fantasy, which I read plenty of. Historical fiction is one of the genres that I really just don't read a lot of. And so The Nightingale was on the top of my list, and man, did I enjoy this book. I did a full review for this, so I'll link it up there if you didn't see it. I go into depth. I have a spoiler-free section where I give 3 pros and 3 cons about the book, and then I have a spoiler-filled section where we really dive into all of the thoughts. I got pretty emotional in it, just now remembered that. But anyway, I really loved this book. I thought that it was a really thoughtful book. I think the writing in general it did such a good job of really making me feel like I was there. I remember there was this one scene where one of the characters was out in the streets, and it described how dirty it was and the environment and how everyone around her looked and how she was feeling, and I felt like I could taste the dirt in the air, and I could see the people around her, like I could feel the desperation. This author did such a good job at painting this picture and really making me feel like I was experiencing everything with them, and with this being such a dramatic and heavy book at times, that is something that hurt me, but it's also something that really, oh man, it was just so well executed. I really was impressed with this book. If you haven't seen my review, I recommend checking it out. Go into depth. Next, I have My Only Sunshine, which is a thriller. So this is about, it primarily follows Taylor. So at the time of this book, she is 18 years old, but it's about her when she was 13. She was abducted and she was held captive for about a month, and then she was able to escape. But when she escaped, her mind blocked out everything that happened to her. So she has little flashes of memory, but she doesn't remember the majority of what happened to her, and her captor has gone free. They still haven't found him. So this story picks up when she's 18 and she's still recovering. She's in therapy. She's developed some relationships, but she still has a lot of PTSD. And then her captor starts getting back into her life. He knows where she is. He can get into her house. He can contact her. And he started doing more abductions in her name, essentially, like people that look like her, trying to connect himself to her while also getting close enough that it's clear that he could get to her, and making it clear that he's coming for her. That's all I'm going to say. I really don't want to say a lot because it's a thriller and it's so good. This also follows Andy, who is a detective working on the case, and he is also a close family friend. So we get his perspective as well, and the balance between Taylor's perspective and Andy's perspective is really good. It's primarily Taylor, but those chapters from Andy are so well done. This book, I felt, was very engaging the entire way through. I read it twice because, if you don't know, I narrate audiobooks. This is one of the audiobooks that I narrated this year. And you have to read it first before you narrate it. So the first time I read it, I suspected everyone. I didn't trust anyone. And then the second time I read it while I was narrating it, I saw all the clues. And it was just, man, it was so well done. And the ending was so good. I'm really picky about my endings to thrillers because I really want the ending to be really gritty. Thrillers are gritty, right? So I want the ending to be gritty too. And this ending really was great. I loved it. I loved this book. Highly recommend it. This is also self-published, so you get to support some self-published authors if you, or a self-published author if you purchase. Highly recommend. Links to all these books in the description, in case you're wondering. Beauty and the Beast! Okay, so I really have kind of been slacking on my classics game for the last several months. I love classics, but I just haven't been focusing on them as much lately. There was dust. It made sense that I did that just now. Anyway, Beauty and the Beast. Oh man, so I really love classic fairy tales, and classic fairy tales are what got me into classics. They're a great starting point. And Beauty and the Beast, man, I enjoyed reading this so much. I loved seeing the origin of the story that I loved so much as a child. I I really loved the complexity of the spell and how everything that happened in the first half of the book tied in so well with the second half of the book. I really loved, I mean, it was just, oh man, it was just so well done, and it was so engaging. I really recommend this. I always recommend fairy tales to get you started with classics because they're short, they're easy to read, you already know the story, but this, it's just like, it's different. So I do recommend this. Really good, really good. Next, I have The Name of the Wind. Link to my video for worst books of the year so far in the corner if you want to know how I felt about the second book in the Kingkiller Chronicles. But book one, I loved. This narrative, so I'm sure you already know the story of this, but this narrative is a story being told. So we start off with Kvothe when he is a bartender, and he is basically like this hero, this legend, and this chronicler comes to him and wants to hear his story told. So Kvothe agrees to tell his story. So it's a person telling a story within a story, and it's such a slow story. I said this in my review. Oh, review linked in the corner. I said this in my review, but this really isn't a story about an event in someone's life. It's a story about someone's life. So it's very slow moving, feels meandering a lot of the time because you're just taking your time step by step through Kvothe's life, which usually wouldn't work for me, but with this it worked so well. I really loved the characters in the story. The magic is so interesting, but it's also one of my biggest complaints because I love hard magic systems, and it's just not explained enough for me. But the story itself is so interesting, and the events that go around him are just so engaging, and I really love to see Kvothe's struggles and how he overcomes them. I loved this story so much. Did not love the second one, but here's hoping book 3 is amazing and changes my mind. And the last book that I'll be talking about in this video is Red Seas Under Red Skies. This is the second book in the Gentleman Bastard series. Book 1 is The Lies of Locke Lamora. I read this last year, and it's, oh my gosh, this series has quickly risen up to one of my favorite series. Oh my goodness, I'm actually reading the third book this month, so hopefully it'll end up on my favorite books of the year at the end of this year. But oh my goodness. So, okay, Gentleman Bastards follows Locke Lamora, who was an orphan, and he was sold, daggum, and he was sold to this thief and con artist who buys orphans and trains them to be thieves and con artists. So we follow Locke, who's like this scrap of a kid, and who's just this great thief with a terrible moral compass that's incredibly clever. And we follow Locke as well as this team of orphans that he's grown up with and learned to live on the streets and to be thieves. And it's this amazing camaraderie, found family, also with thieving and a massive elaborate heist. I'm holding up Red Seas as I'm talking about The Lies of Locke Lamora. I say I always compare it to Six of Crows. I say that it's Six of Crows, but way better. It also has my favorite friendship ever in The Lies of Locke Lamora and in Red Seas Under Red Skies. So Red Seas Under Red Skies is book 2, and in this one we are pirates for hire who have been blackmailed and tricked, and oh my goodness, I loved this so much. Like, probably right on the same level as The Lies of Locke Lamora. Really excited for the Republic of Thieves, but man, oh man, do I recommend this series. The Lies of Locke Lamora, the Gentleman Bastard series has a really unique writing style, and it took me a while to get into it, especially because you deal with Locke's past and Locke's present, and going back and forth can be pretty jarring because a lot of times the switch happens in the middle of action. But once you realize how it's structured, how every time you go back, the information that you're getting in his past is directly going to affect the next chapter for now. It's going to give you more information that'll tie into the now. Once you realize how it all works together, it's such a brilliant narrative structure. If you are a character-driven reader, you gots to read these. If you are an action-packed, plot-driven reader, you can rate them too. I'm not very character driven, but I loved these. These are some of the best characters that I've read, plus a plot that keeps me going. Like, I am very much, I need things to be moving forward. I really don't like when things just stand still forever. And this book does such a great job of constantly moving forward while being so character focused. These books, I love the Gentleman Bastard series so daggone much. And I'm sad that book 3 is going to be the last I have of it, at least for a little while. I just realized there's one more book that I really want to talk about. So, Pet Sematary by Stephen King. So horror is also on the list of genres that I really wanted to give more attention this year, give a try, basically. So Stephen King, this is my first Stephen King novel that I've finished. I DNF'd one of his books forever ago. Not really, actually earlier this year. Anyway, Pet Sematary follows a family who has just moved into a new area, and it turns out that there's this cemetery where the kids bury their pets because there's a roaring highway, and when the pets die on the highway, usually, the pets get buried in that cemetery. It's kind of creepy, but whatever, it works. Turns out the cemetery has more to it than you would initially imagine. So this is a very character-focused, slow burn kind of story. The writing and the narrative structure of this really reminds me of Frederick Bachman, which is one of my favorite authors, which makes me really want to read more King. But really what I loved about this book so much is that it is a story about grief. King did an absolutely brilliant job at exploring grief with this story. He started with the lowest level. He started with a little girl who lost her cat and is mad. He moves up to a family member being lost, then moves it up again, and then moves it up again. I don't want to say too much, but he explores grief in these different layers and different situations and how people respond and cope differently. And he does it in a way that also provides so much information about the proper way to grieve, and it's difficult to explain. This is a horror book, right? Okay, we know the genre. But with that being true, I really felt, I said this in my wrap-up, so I feel like I'm being really repetitive, but I really felt like this book, oddly enough, this horror novel helped me process my own grief. It's a really interesting story. Just on its own, it's cool. But I really love that the point of the story wasn't to scare you for horror's sake, but the horror of this novel was used as a device to explore this deep, raw, painful emotion. And it was just so well executed. I am so blown away by this book. I have a list of Stephen King novels that I'm really excited to dive into now. I don't know, man. I was so impressed by this story, and I didn't think King would be for me, but now I have pretty high hopes. Okay, so those are some of my favorite books that I read so far this year. Hopefully, by the end of the year, this list will be much longer. If you've read any of these books and would like to chat with me about it more in the comments, or if you'd like to chat with me about your favorite books so far this year, I'd love to talk with you some more. I post videos every Monday, Thursday, and Saturday. I'll see you guys again soon. Bye.